Would you have a scary story? Would you have a ghost story? Welcome, friends. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome, gang. It's been too long. It's been a very long time since we did any ghost story reading on a live stream. I'm so delighted to have you all with me. Hello, everyone. Hello, gang in the chat. It's good to be back by the fireside. Welcome. If you are joining us for the first time with one of these, it's exactly what it sounds like in the description. I read scary old, out of copyright ghost stories. We all enjoy them. I'm raising money this stream for Mind, which is a brilliant mental health charity. If you have a look in the description, you will find a link to donate. What I should probably do if I was smart, is pin that in the chat. So let me do that right now. There we go. Cool. Okay. So what are we reading tonight, folks? We are reading The Mezzotint by M.R. James, The Clock by W.F. Harvey, and then I'm delighted to say we're going to be reading 2 stories by Andy Farrant, my fellow podcaster and an absolutely incredible writer of horror fiction. If you haven't read his stories, then you are robbing yourself of a great experience. He's got loads of stories available. They're all up and available to read for free, and they're brilliant and bite-sized, and yeah, they are all charming. And I had a really, really tough time choosing which to read, but I settled on my 2 personal favourites, and ones that I thought it would be really fun to read. Jingle, Junction and Lowfi Beats to Kill 2. So I'm really looking forward to reading those in a little bit. Wow, we got a lot of people watching. Hello, everyone. Okay, so while I'm reading, I won't be checking in with the chat, but between stories, obviously, I'll say hi. We can talk about what we thought of the stories and if we liked them. And obviously, I will be reading messages from the Just Giving page. We already have raised £235 for Mind, which, again, is a spectacular mental health charity. I love to support Mind. It's a great cause. They do a lot of good work. If you've got some stuff going on mentally, like if you're living with depression, or if, like me, you have obsessive compulsive disorder, or whatever it is you have cooking up top, I find it just immensely reassuring to know that there is a large, powerful charity like Mind that is basically there. Apart from anything, just the visibility of that charity, I think, is just a brilliant reminder whenever we see it. That so many of us have mental health things going on too. Reverie Ray, OCD Solidarity, Nimble Tack as well, and Maximus the Mystic. Wow. Angel Beat says depression checking in. Anders Danielson, Dan Nielsen. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Bipolar, amazing. Okay, well done, gang. Brilliant work. Athanasius donated £25 and says Spookums and Uttos. Oh my. Anonymous $42, $20. Thury Weaver, always happy to listen to Luke the Spooky. D Kirkbride, thank you for your donation. Preeter Geek Libby. Nikki, Hannah Axelson says time for the Horse of the Invisible 2 Electric Pentacle. Wow, that's a throwback. Dan Long, thanks for the donation. Annie, Alex Hansen and Phil Clamau. Apologies if I don't get to your message. There are already a lot of them, which is just fantastic. Monkeys Forever, wow, really generous. £100 donation. Such a great cause and a delightful spooky stream for the season. Loving all your videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Okay. Shall we read a ghost story? The first one we're going to read is The Mezzotint by M.R. James. I've read a lot of M.R. James in my time, on and off streams. I think his stories are absolutely fantastic. They are short and punchy and unbelievably creepy. They tend to focus on British academics, and this one is no different. He, being a writer of the old-timey persuasion, does occasionally veer towards sentences that are unbelievably long and a little hard to follow. So I apologise if I ever trip up. M.R. James is particularly trippy, but yeah, he is he is an absolute legend in the space of Gothic ghost stories. As ever, folks, along the way, beware the real horror, Victorian attitudes to social issues, race, class, mental health. All right. I feel like it's time to read a story. Okay. I've got my goblet. It's full of wine. I've got my water. It's water. Okay. Chat, I've got you in my peripheral vision. See you on the other side. If you survive. Some time ago, I believe I had the pleasure of telling you the story of an adventure which happened to a friend of mine by the name of Denniston during his pursuit of objects of art for the museum at Cambridge. He did not publish his experiences very widely upon his return to England, but they could not fail to become known to a good many of his friends, and among others to the gentleman who at that time presided over an art museum at another university. It was to be expected that the story should make a considerable impression on the mind of a man whose vocation lay in lines similar to Denniston's, and that he should be eager to catch at any explanation of the matter which tended to make it seem improbable that he should ever be called upon to deal with so agitating an emergency. It was indeed somewhat consoling to him to reflect that he was not expected to acquire ancient MSS for his institution. That was the business of the Shelburnian Library. The authorities of that might, if they pleased, ransack obscure corners of the continent for such matters. He was glad to be obliged at the moment to confine his attention to enlarging the already unsurpassed collection of English topographical drawings and engravings possessed by his museum. Yet, as it turned out, even a department so homely and familiar as this may have its dark corners, and to one of these Mr. Williams was unexpectedly introduced. Those who have taken even the most limited interest in the acquisition of topographical pictures are aware that there is one London dealer whose aid is indispensable to their researches. Mr. J. W. Britnell publishes at short intervals very admirable catalogues of a large and constantly changing stock of engravings, plans, and old sketches of mansions, churches, and towns in England and Wales. These catalogues were, of course, the ABC of his subject to Mr. Williams, but as his museum already contained an enormous accumulation of topographical pictures, he was a regular rather than a copious buyer, and he rather looked to Mr. Britnell to fill up gaps in the rank and file of his collection than to supply him with rarities. Now, in February of last year, there appeared upon Mr. Williams's desk at the museum a catalogue from Mr. Britnell's Emporium, and accompanying it was a typewritten communication from the dealer himself. This letter ran as follows. Dear Sir, we beg to call your attention to number 978 in our accompanying catalogue, which we shall be glad to send on approval. Yours faithfully, J. W. Britnell. To turn to number 978 in the accompanying catalogue was, with Mr. Williams, as he observed to himself, the work of a moment, and in the place indicated he found the following entry. 978, unknown. Interesting mezzotint. View of a manor house, early part of the century, 15 by 10 inches, black frame, £2 2 shillings. It was not specially exciting, and the price seemed high. However, as Mr. Britnell, who knew his business and his customer, seemed to set store by it, Mr. Williams wrote a postcard asking for the article to be sent on approval, along with some other engravings and sketchings which appeared in the same catalogue. And so he passed without much excitement of anticipation to the ordinary labours of the day. A parcel of any kind always arrives a day later than you expect it, and that of Mr. Britnell proved, as I believe the right phrase goes, no exception to the rule. It was delivered at the museum by the afternoon post of Saturday, after Mr. Williams had left his work, and it was accordingly brought round to his rooms in college by the attendant, in order that he might not have to wait over Sunday before looking through it and returning such of the contents as he did not propose to keep. And here he found it, when he came in to tea with a friend. The only item with which I am concerned was the rather large, black-framed mezzotint of which I have already quoted the short description given in Mr. Britnell's catalogue. Some more details of it will have to be given, though I cannot hope to put before you the look of the picture as clearly as it is present to my own eye. Very nearly the exact duplicate of it may be seen in a good many old inn parlours, or in the passages of undisturbed country mansions at the present moment. It was a rather indifferent mezzotint, and an indifferent mezzotint is perhaps the worst form of engraving known. It presented a full-face view of a not very large manor house of the last century, with 3 rows of plain sashed windows with rusticated masonry about them, a parapet with balls or vases at the angles, and a small portico in the centre. On either side were trees, and in front a considerable expanse of lawn. The legend AWF Sculpsit was engraved on the narrow margin, and there was no further inscription. The whole thing gave the impression that it was the work of an amateur. What in the world Mr. Britnell could mean by affixing the price of £2 2 shillings to such an object was more than Mr. Williams could imagine. He turned it over with a good deal of contempt. Upon the back was a paper label, the left hand of which had been torn off. All that remained were the ends of 2 lines of writing. The first had the letters Lee Hall, the second Sussex. It would perhaps be just worthwhile to identify the place represented, which he could easily do with the help of a gazetteer, and then he would send it back to Mr. Britnell with some remarks reflecting upon the judgment of that gentleman. He lighted the candles, for it was now dark, made the tea, and supplied the friend with whom he had been playing golf, for I believe the authorities of the university I write of indulge in that pursuit by way of relaxation, and tea was taken to the accompaniment of a discussion which golfing persons can imagine for themselves, but which the conscientious writer has no rights to inflict upon any non-golfing persons. The conclusion arrived at was that certain strokes might have been better, and that in certain emergencies neither player had experienced that amount of luck which a human being has a right to expect. It was now that the friend, let us call him Professor Binks, took up the framed engraving and said, "What's this place, Williams?" "Just what I'm going to try and find out," said Williams, going to the shelf for a gazetteer. "Look at the back. Something Lee Hall, either in Sussex or Essex. Half the name's gone, you see. You don't happen to know it, I suppose?" "It's from that man Britnell, I suppose, isn't it?" said Binks. "Is it for the museum?" "Well, I think I should buy it if the price was 5 shillings, said Williams, "but for some unearthly reason he wants 2 guineas for it. I can't conceive why. It's a wretched engraving, and there aren't even any figures to give it life." "It's not worth 2 guineas, I should think," said Binks. "But I don't think it's so badly done. The moonlight seems rather good to me, and I should have thought there were figures, or at least a figure, just on the edge in front." "Let's look," said Williams. "Well, it's true the light is rather cleverly given. Where's your figure? Oh, yes, just the head in the very front of the picture." And indeed there was. Hardly more than a black blot on the extreme edge of the engraving, the head of a man or woman, a good deal muffled up, the back turned to the spectator, and looking towards the house. Williams had not noticed it before. "Still," he said, "though it's a cleverer thing than I thought, I can't spend 2 guineas of museum money on a picture of a place I don't know." Professor Binks had his work to do and soon went, and very nearly up to hall time Williams was engaged in a vain attempt to identify the subject of his picture. If the vowel before the NG had only been left, it would be very easy enough, he thought, but as it is, the name may be anything, from Guestingley to Langley, and there are many more names ending like this than I thought, and this rotten book has no index of terminations. Hall in Mr. Williams's college was at 7. It need not be dwelt upon, the less so as he met there colleagues who had been playing golf during the afternoon, and words with which we have no concern were freely bandied across the table. Merely golfing words, I would hasten to explain. I suppose an hour or more to have been spent in what is called common room after dinner. Later in the evening some few retired to Williams's rooms, and I have little doubt that whist was played and tobacco smoked. During a lull in these operations, Williams picked up the mezzotint from the table without looking at it and handed it to a person mildly interested in art, telling him where it had come from and the other particulars, which we already know. The gentleman took it carelessly, looked at it, then said in a tone of some interest, "It's really a very good piece of work, Williams. It has quite a feeling of the Romantic period. The light is admirably managed, it seems to me, and the figure, though it's rather too grotesque, is somehow very impressive." "Yes, isn't it?" said Williams, who was just then busy giving whisky and soda to others of the company and was unable to come across the room to look at the view again. It was by this time rather late in the evening, and the visitors were on the move. After they went, Williams was obliged to write a letter or two and clear up some odd bits of work. At last, some time past midnight, he was disposed to turn in, and he put out his lamp after lighting his bedroom candle. The picture lay face upwards on the table where the last man who looked at it had put it, and it caught his eye as he turned the lamp down. What he saw made him very nearly drop the candle on the floor, and he declares now that if he had been left in the dark at that moment, he would have had a fit. But as that did not happen, he was able to put down in the light on the table and take a good look at the picture. It was indubitable. Rankly impossible, no doubt, but absolutely certain. In the middle of the lawn, in front of the unknown house, there was a figure where no figure had been at 5 o'clock that afternoon. It was crawling on all fours towards the house, and it was muffled in a strange black garment with a white cross on the back. I do not know what is the ideal course to pursue in a situation of this kind. I can only tell you what Mr. Williams did. He took the picture by one corner and carried it across the passage to a second set of rooms which he possessed. There he locked it up in a drawer, sported the doors of both sets of rooms, and retired to bed. But first he wrote out and signed an account of the extraordinary change which the picture had undergone since it had come into his possession. Sleep visited him rather late, but it was consoling to reflect that the behaviour of the picture did not depend upon his own unsupported testimony. Evidently the man who had looked at it the night before had seen something of the same kind as he had. Otherwise he might have been tempted to think that something gravely wrong was happening either to his eyes or his mind. This possibility being fortunately precluded, two matters awaited him on the morrow. He must take stock of the picture very carefully, and call in a witness for the purpose, and he must make a determined effort to ascertain what house it was that was represented. He would therefore ask his neighbour Nisbet to breakfast with him, and he would subsequently spend a morning over the gazetteer. Nisbet was disengaged and arrived around 9:30. His host was not quite dressed, I'm sorry to say, even at this late hour. During breakfast nothing was said about the mezzotint by Williams, save that he had a picture on which he wished for Nisbet's opinion. But those who are familiar with university life can picture for themselves the wide and delightful range of subjects over which the conversation of two fellows of Canterbury College is likely to extend during a Sunday morning breakfast. Hardly a topic was left unchallenged, from golf to lawn tennis. Yet I am bound to say that Williams was rather distraught, for his interest naturally centred in that very strange picture, which was now reposing, face downwards, in the drawer in the room opposite. The morning pipe was at last lighted, and the moment had arrived for which he looked. With very considerable, almost tremulous excitement, he ran across, unlocked the drawer, and, extracting the picture, still face downwards, ran back and put it into Nisbet's hands. "Now," he said, "Nisbet, I want you to tell me exactly what you see in that picture. Describe it, if you don't mind, rather minutely. I'll tell you why afterwards." "Well," said Nisbet, "I have here a view of a country house. English, I presume, by moonlight." "Moonlight? You're sure of that?" "Certainly. The moon appears to be on the wane, if you wish for details, and there are clouds in the sky." "All right, go on. I'll swear," added Williams in an aside, "there was no moon when I saw it first." "Well, there's not much more to be said," Nisbet continued. "The house has 1, 2, 3 rows of windows, 5 in each row, except at the bottom where there's a porch instead of the middle one, and... But what about figures? Said Williams with marked interest. There aren't any, said Nisbet. But... What? No figure on the grass in front? Not a thing. You'll swear to that? Certainly I will, but there is just one other thing. What? Why, one of the windows on the ground floor, left of the door, is open. Is it really? My goodness. He must have got in, said Williams with great excitement, and he hurried to the back of the sofa on which Nisbet was sitting, and, catching the picture from him, verified the matter for himself. It was quite true. There was no figure, and there was the open window. Williams, after a moment of speechless surprise, went to the writing table and scribbled for a short time. Then he brought 2 papers to Nisbet, and asked him first to sign one — it was his own description of the picture, which you have just heard — and then to read the other, which was William's statement written the night before. What can it all mean? Said Nisbet. Exactly, said Williams. Well, one thing I must do, or 3 things now I think about it. I must find out from Garwood, this was his last night's visitor, what he saw, and then I must get the thing photographed before it goes further, and then I must find out what the place is. I can do the photographing myself, said Nisbet, and I will. But you know, it looks very much as if we were assisting at the working out of a tragedy somewhere. The question is, has it happened already, or is it going to come off? You must find out what the place is. Yes, he said, looking at the picture again. I expect you're right. He has got in. And if I don't mistake, there'll be the devil to pay in one of the rooms upstairs. I'll tell you what, said Williams. I'll take the picture across to old Green. This was the senior fellow of the college, who had been bursar for many years. It's quite likely he'll know it. We have property in Essex and Sussex, and he must have been over the 2 counties a lot in his time. Quite likely he will, said Nisbet, but just let me take my photograph first. But look here, I rather think Green isn't up today. He wasn't in hall last night, and I think I heard him say he was going down for the Sunday. That's true, too, said Williams. I know he's gone to Brighton. Well, if you photograph it now, I'll go across to Garwood and get his statement, and you keep an eye on it while I'm gone. I'm beginning to think 2 guineas is not a very exorbitant price for it now. In a short time, he had returned, and brought Mr. Garwood with him. Garwood's statement was to the effect that the figure, when he had seen it, was clear on the edge of the picture, but had not gone far across the lawn. He remembered a white mark on the back of its drapery, but could not have been sure it was a cross. A document to this effect was then drawn up and signed, and Nisbet proceeded to photograph the picture. Now what do you mean to do? He said. Are you going to sit and watch it all day? Well, no, I think not, said Williams. I rather imagine we're meant to see the whole thing. You see, between the time I saw it last night and this morning, there was time for lots of things to happen, but the creature only got into the house. It could easily have got through its business in the time and gone to its own place again, but the fact of the window being open, I think, must mean that it's in there now. So I feel quite easy about leaving it, and besides, I have a kind of idea that it wouldn't change much, if at all, in the daytime. We might go out for a walk this afternoon and come in to tea, or whenever it gets dark. I shall leave it out on the table here and sport the door. My skip can get in, but no one else. The 3 agreed that this would be a good plan, and further, that if they spent the afternoon together, they would be less likely to talk about the business to other people, for any rumours of such a transaction as was going on would bring the whole of the Phasmatological Society about their ears. We may give them a respite until 5 o'clock. At or near that hour, the 3 were entering Williams's staircase. They were at first slightly annoyed to see that the doors of his room were unspotted, but in a moment it was remembered that on Sunday the skips came for orders an hour or so earlier than on weekdays. However, a surprise was awaiting them. The first thing they saw was the picture, leaning up against a pile of books on the table, as it had been left. And the next thing was Williams's skip, seated on a chair opposite, gazing at it with undisguised horror. How was this? Mr. Filcher, the name is not my own invention, was a servant of considerable standing, and set the standard of etiquette to all his own college and to several neighbouring ones, and nothing could be more alien to his practice than to be found sitting on his master's chair, or appearing to take any particular notice of his master's furniture or pictures. Indeed, he seemed to feel this himself. He started violently when the three men came into the room and got up with a marked effort. Then he said, "I ask your pardon, sir, for taking such a freedom as to set down." "Not at all, Robert," interposed Mr. Williams. "I was meaning to ask you sometime what you thought of that picture." "Well, sir, of course I don't set up my opinion against yours, but it ain't the picture I should hang where my little girl could see it, sir." "Wouldn't you, Robert? Why not?" "No, sir. Why, the poor child, I recollect once she saw a door Bible with pictures not half what that is, and we had to set up with her 3 or 4 nights afterwards, if you'll believe me. And if she was to catch a sight of this skeleton here, or whatever it is, carrying off the poor baby, she would be in a taking. You know how it is with children, how nervous they get with a little thing and all, but what I should say, it don't seem a right picture to be laying about, sir, not where anyone that's liable to be startled could come on it. Should you be wanting anything this evening, sir?" "Thank you, sir." With these words, the excellent man left to continue the rounds of his masters, and you may be sure the gentleman whom he left lost no time in gathering around the engraving. There was the house, as before, under the waning moon and the drifting clouds. The window that had been open was shut, and the figure was once more on the lawn. But not this time crawling cautiously on hands and knees. Now it was erect and stepping swiftly with long strides towards the front of the picture. The moon was behind it, and the black drapery hung down over its face, so that only hints of that could be seen, and what was visible made the spectators profoundly thankful that they could see no more than a white dome-like forehead and a few straggling hairs. The head was bent down, and the arms were tightly clasped over an object which could be dimly seen and identified as a child. Whether dead or living, it was not possible to say. The legs of the appearance alone could be plainly discerned, and they were horribly thin. From 5 to 7, the three companions sat and watched the picture by turn. But it never changed. They agreed at last that it would be safe to leave it, and that they would return after Hall and await further developments. When they assembled again at the earliest possible moment, the engraving was there, but the figure was gone, and the house was quiet under the moonbeams. There was nothing for it but to spend the evening over gazetteers and guidebooks. Williams was the lucky one at last, and perhaps he deserved it. At 11:30 p.m, he read from Murray's Guide to Essex the following lines. 16.5 miles Anningley. The church has been an interesting building of Norman date, but was extensively classicised in the last century. It contains the tombs of the family of Francis, whose mansion Anningley Hall, a solid Queen Anne house, stands immediately beyond the churchyard in a park of about 80 acres. The family is now extinct, the last heir having disappeared mysteriously in infancy in the year 1802. The father, Mr. Arthur Francis, was locally known as a talented amateur engraver in mezzotint. After his son's disappearance, he lived in complete retirement at the Hall, and was found dead in his studio on the 3rd anniversary of the disaster, having just completed an engraving of the house, impressions of which are of considerable rarity. This looked like business, and indeed Mr. Green on his return at once identified the house as Anningley Hall. "Is there any kind of explanation of the figure, Green?" was the question which Williams naturally asked. "I don't know, I'm sure, Williams. What used to be said in the place when I first knew it, which was before I came up here, was just this. Old Francis was always very much down on these poaching fellows, and whenever he got a chance, he used to get a man whom he suspected of it turned off the estate, and by degrees he got rid of all of them but one. Squires could do a lot of things then that they daren't think of now. Well, this man that was left was what you find pretty often in that country, the last remains of a very old family. I believe they were lords of the manor at one time. I recollect just the same thing in my own parish." "What, like the man in Tess of the D'Urbervilles?" Williams put in. "Yes, I dare say. It's not a book I could ever read myself. But this fellow could show a row of tombs in the church that there belonged to his ancestors, and all that went to sour him a bit. But Francis, they said, could never get at him. He always kept just on the right side of the law, until one night the keepers found him, at it in a wood right at the end of the estate. I could show you the place now. It marches with some land that used to belong to an uncle of mine. And you can imagine there was a row, and this man, Gordy, that was the name to be sure, Gordy, I thought I should get it, Gordy. He was unlucky enough, poor chap, to shoot a keeper. Well, that was what Francis wanted, and grand juries, you know what they would have been then, and poor Gordy was strung up in double quick time. I've been shown the place he was buried in on the north side of the church. You know the way in that part of the world. Anyone that's been hanged or made away with themselves, they bury them that side. And the idea was that some friend of Gordy's, not a relation because he had none, poor devil, he was the last of his line, land of Spes Ultima Gentis, must have planned to get hold of Francis's boy and put an end to his line too. I don't know, it's a rather out-of-the-way thing for an Essex poacher to think of, but, you know, I should say now it looks more as if old Gordy had managed the job himself. Well, I hate to think of it. Have some whiskey, Williams. These facts were communicated by Williams to Denniston, and by him to a mixed company, of which I was one, and the Seducian professor of ophiology another. I'm sorry to say that the latter, when asked what he thought of it, only remarked, "Oh, those Bridgeford people will say anything," a sentiment which met with the reception it deserved. I have only to add that the picture is now in the Ashleyan Museum, that it has been treated with a view to discovering whether sympathetic ink has been used in it, but without effect, that Mr. Britnell knew nothing of it, save that he was sure it was uncommon, and that, though carefully watched, it has never been known to change again. The end. Ooh. Creepy. Creepy stuff. Okay. Well done, gang. What did we think of that one? I thought that was pretty creepy. Okay, wow. Hello, everyone in the chat. Oh my gosh. Wow. So many of you watching. Hello. It's lovely to see you all. Brilliant. Creepy. Everyone's loving it. Love that eerie, says Nikki Sordy. Let me check in over on Just Giving, because as a reminder, as we read stories tonight, we are raising money for Mind, a brilliant mental health charity. Wow. We've got nearly $1,500 in donations. 1,402. That is amazing, gang. You are brilliant. Ghost in the Hella says, wonderful to see ghost stories make a return. Anonymous says, well played. Will Whitson, thank you very much. Royce LeBlanc is donation boss. Thank you. Caesar says, thank you for being you and doing what you do. Thank you very much. A $60 donation. That's so generous. Lauren says, thank you for supporting such a great cause. You do a wonderful job at creating a safe space for your community, and I hope what we raise will help others find their own safe spaces too. Well put, Lauren, and thank you for the donation. Charlotte Ringer, thank you very much. Kieran, Colin Thompson, I've re-listened to the Karnaki stories before bed countless times. A small donation is the least I can do. Thank you, Colin Thompson. It's very much appreciated. It's all for a good cause. Noah McBrayer Jones, thank you very much. Bow1156, these old streams got me through the depression and loneliness when I work nights. Thanks for all that you do. Look, thank you very much. That's really kind. And Bionic Dean, this is my first time catching one of these streams. It's cool that you're raising money for a good cause. Amy and Graham, thank you very much for the donation. Sarah Mattox, some of my earliest memories are of my mother going in and out of mental health facilities. I've also struggled with mental health issues for most of my life. Happy to donate to this great organisation. Thank you, Sarah Mattox. That is really generous of you. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for the spookenings. A welcome seasonal return. But loving all your normal adult Luke content too. It's excellent stuff. Thank you. Also, OCD here. Yay. Yay, Ben. Cool. Friend-shaped KD, thanks so much. Love the spooky stories and an amazing cause too. Having recently started medication and therapy for anxiety and depression, it's wonderful of you to be raising awareness. Breaking stigma. Thanks so much for your donation, Friend-shaped KD. Yeah, it's going to a really good charity. Lizzie, Simon, Emma S, Robert Price, Gentle Mandrill. Feels so good to have a reading like this again for the good old times. Thanks very much, everyone. All those anonymous donations. Jenny H, Meg, Arian, your reading stories help my mental health, so happy to give something back. Thanks so much. Katie, thank you. Ben Jones, Mark Mahan, thanks so much. John Enfield, Adrian K, Michelle, Stephen Fiore, Erasmus Strange, Cassie, so many of you. Novistry, Gracie Bark, that's a beautiful message, thank you. And thank you for the donation. Butt Mad, Northwest, for the well-being of all minds. Goblin says, love everything you do, Luke. Thanks for supporting such an important cause. Cheers. Okay. Aleki Steve the Writer. Monkeys Forever. Tony Rowe. Mr. and Mrs. Harker. Laurie, donating so the ghosts don't get me. Robin Jane. Precious Rogue. Thanks so much. Gang, you're all brilliant. Awesome. Jenny Ashcroft, thanks so much. David Baxter and Sakei. And thanks everyone who's on the page but remaining anonymous. That's awesome. Snap Grackle Pop says, my favourite part of the story was when they didn't give more details on golf. Yeah, right. That was good. That was a particular... Should we find that again? That was a particularly salty golfing line, wasn't it, from M.R. James? Tea was taken to the accompaniment of a discussion which golfing persons can imagine for themselves, but which the conscientious writer has no right to inflict upon any non-golfing persons. Ouch! Savage, M.R. James. Brutal. What's wrong with golf? Says Danny McNamara. I don't know, man. Golf seems alright. To me. Oh, amazing. We're over 1.5k raised. Amazing. Not a Frog says, ADHD here. What are we doing again? Thank you very much, Not a Frog. It's lovely. Okay. I really like that story. There was a brilliant BBC adaptation that I think was directed or written by... Who was it? I would like to remember. That's right, it's got Rory Kinnear in it. Mark Gatiss, that's it. Mark Gatiss wrote it. And directed it. And yeah, it's really good. It's really good. A really brilliant adaptation. It's 29 minutes long. Yeah, track that down if you can. It does a good job. That said, I think one of the things that's so cool about M.R. James's writing is, like, I think he has a brilliant instinct for when to stop describing. Like, less is more, I think, and your mind really fills in the gaps, doesn't it, on that figure on the lawn. It's very, very, very unsettling. Okay. Our next story, which I'll read in the moment, I'll pop back to the Just Giving page and read some more messages first, but our next story is quite a lot shorter, but I really like it. It's by W.F. Harvey. I've read a story, I think I've read a few stories by him before on stream. I've definitely read August Heat, which is one of his most famous ones. It's very, very, very short. Beautifully written, though, and very creepy. And this one, The Clock, it's another story that's just, it's very brief. It's more like a snapshot. It's sort of a study in unnerving. Yeah, rather than having like a kind of concrete or obvious monster or ghost or anything like that. It's just, I think I really, really like it, and I think it does a brilliant job of just conjuring a sense of unease. And I read it about a week ago in preparation for this stream, and there's a line in it that's just been sort of living in my head rent free. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. Nikki Sordy says, I love ghost stories that don't explain everything. It leaves you thinking about it afterwards. Nimbletax says, the James story that really freaks me out is the ash tree. I think we did the ash tree, didn't we? Oh, Beast with Five Fingers. That's W.F. Harvey as well. Yeah, we did that one. That Beast with Five Fingers is a longer story, and it's less of a snapshot, but it's a really fun one. But yeah, this one, The Clock, I thought it would be a good one for this stream, for a Halloween stream, because it's just like a little shiver, and that just felt right for a Halloween stream. Okay. Checking in now with the donations. Whoa! Nikki Pickles, thank you so much. A really kind and generous donation. 2 days before payday. This is the best I can do. Thanks for reading these stories. For all that they are spooky, the vibe is soothing. Thank you, Nikki Pickles. Alex Gawley, wow, has donated $200. That is unbelievably generous. Alex Gawley, wow, thank you. That is money going to a good cause and a real good charity, who I'm proud to say I've raised money for many times before, and I always feel like I'm doing some good. That's awesome, Alex Gawley. Thank you so much. Wow. Lizzie Bridge, thank you for your donation. Ask not for whom the Venga bus is coming, it is coming for thee. Nice. Sertraline says, well done, Luke Westaway, amazing cause and a brilliant hang. Thank you for your donation. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Yasmin. I go back to your F1 rock video whenever I need a laugh. I don't see why, Yasmin. It's not supposed to be funny. Clumsy the Clown tripped, fell, and tossed $10 into the pot. Thanks, Clumsy the Clown. You're awesome. Star Systems, thanks very much. Matchstick Man. Spooky spookenings are spooky, but keeping good mental health is the real horror. Huzzahs for mind. Thanks very much. Eugen Frustic, thank you for your wonderful work supporting such a great cause. Thanks very much. And $20 from Anonymous. Awesome. Okay. Well done. Thanks, Clumsy the Clown. You're doing a great job. Oh. Silverania, $50. Wow, that's really generous, Silverania. Something to help you reach your target. Anonymous donates with a comment, don't wait until 2016. That's really lovely. That's a reference to a song I did about getting therapy in 2016, which I wish I'd done years earlier. So yeah, a nice sentiment, thank you. And Y2KK94 brackets Patreon Dr_5 donating, and great for the stories, Luke. Thank you so much. That's really generous. Okay, gang. Shall we read another little story? We're going to read The Clock by W.F. Harvey, and then we're going to read some stories by Andy Farrant, which I'm so excited about. Andy's stories are brilliant. They are... I'm really looking forward to them because they just flow beautifully. Andy has a real knack for writing prose that just sort of flows. It's just kind of just easy to read. It just, your eyes just kind of skip across it, and there's some beautiful turns of phrases. It is very much the opposite of M.R. James's chewy Victorian Gothic horror. And yeah, we can talk after I've read them about why I wanted to read these stories in particular, from Andy's significant archive of horror short stories. But yeah, I really like these two, and I'm confident that you'll love them. If you've read them before, I hope to do it justice with the reading, and if you haven't, well, what have you been doing? But yeah, I hope to I'll convert you. You'll see. Jess Hannon, €15. Thank you very much. Adane, love your spooky screams. Spooky streams, not screams. Thank you very much. Bumblewings, a couple of pounds for a haunted picture. I would pay more if I could. Spooky solidarity. Thank you so much, Bumblewings. That is a really kind, really generous. Thank you for your donation. Okay. Right. Let's read W.F. Harvey's The Clock. I should tell you before I kick off, this one has a bit of a cold open. The story takes the form of a letter, which is why for the first few sentences you're going to be like, what's happening? But yeah, it'll all make sense, don't worry. Well. The Clock. I liked your description of the people at the pension. I can just picture that rather sinister Miss Cornelius with her toupee and clinking bangles. I don't wonder you felt frightened that night when you found her sleepwalking in the corridor. But after all, why shouldn't she sleepwalk? As to the movements of the furniture in the lounge on the Sunday, you are, I suppose, in an earthquake zone, though an earthquake seems too big an explanation for the ringing of that little handbell on the mantelpiece. It's rather as if our parlourmaid, another new one, were to call a stray elephant to account for the teapot we found broken yesterday. You have at least escaped the eternal problem of maids in Italy. Yes, my dear, I most certainly believe you. I have never had experiences quite like yours, but your mention of Miss Cornelius has reminded me of something rather similar that happened to me nearly 20 years ago, soon after I left school. I was staying with my aunt in Hampstead. You remember her, I expect, or if not her, the poodle, Monsieur, that she used to make perform such pathetic tricks. There was another guest whom I had never met before, Mrs. Caleb. She lived in Lewes and had been staying with my aunt for about a fortnight, recuperating after a series of domestic upheavals, which had culminated in her two servants leaving her at an hour's notice without any reason, according to Mrs. Caleb, but I wondered. I'd never seen the maids. I had seen Mrs. Caleb, and frankly, I disliked her. She left the same sort of impression on me as I gather your Miss Cornelius leaves on you. Something queer and secretive. Underground, if you can use the expression, rather than underhand. And I could feel in my body that she did not like me. It was summer. Joan Denton, you remember her husband was killed in Gallipoli, had suggested that I should go down to spend the day with her. Her people had rented a little cottage some 3 miles out of Lewes. We arranged a day. It was gloriously fine for a wonder, and I had planned to leave that stuffy old Hampstead house before the old ladies were astir. But Mrs. Caleb waylaid me in the hall, just as I was going out. "I wonder," she said, "I wonder if you could do me a small favour. If you do have any time to spare in Lewes, only if you do, would you be so kind as to call at my house? I left a little travelling clock there in the hurry of parting. If it's not in the drawing room, it will be in my bedroom or in one of the maids' bedrooms. I know I lent it to the cook, who was a poor riser, but I can't remember if she returned it. Would it be too much to ask? The house has been locked up for 12 days, but everything is in order. I have the keys here. The large one is for the garden gate, the small one for the front door." I could only accept, and she proceeded to tell me how I could find Ashgrove House. "You will feel quite like a burglar," she said, "but mind, it's only if you have time to spare." As a matter of fact, I found myself glad of any excuse to kill time. Poor old Joan had been taken suddenly ill in the night. They feared appendicitis, and though her people were very kind and asked me to stay to lunch, I could see that I should only be in the way, and made Mrs. Caleb's commission an excuse for an early departure. I found Ashgrove without difficulty. It was a medium-sized red brick house, standing by itself in a high-walled garden that bounded a narrow lane. A flagged path led from the gate to the front door, in front of which grew not an ash but a monkey puzzle that must have made the rooms unnecessarily gloomy. The side door, as I expected, was locked. The dining room and drawing room lay on either side of the hall, and, as the windows of both were shuttered, I left the hall door open, and in the dim light looked round hurriedly for the clock, which, from what Mrs. Caleb had said, I hardly expected to find in either of the downstairs rooms. It was neither on table nor mantelpiece. The rest of the furniture was carefully covered over with white dust sheets. Then I went upstairs, but before doing so I closed the front door. I did in fact feel rather like a burglar, and I thought that if anyone did happen to see the front door open, I might have difficulty in explaining things. Happily, the upstairs windows were not shuttered. I made a hurried search of the principal bedrooms. They had been left in apple pie order. Nothing was out of place, but there was no sign of Mrs. Caleb's clock. The impression that the house gave me, you know the sense of personality that a house conveys, was neither pleasing nor displeasing, but it was stuffy. Stuffy from the absence of fresh air, with an additional stuffiness added that seemed to come out from the hangings and quilts and antimacassars. The corridor, onto which the bedroom I had examined opened, communicated with a smaller wing, an older part of the house I imagined, which contained a box room and the maid's sleeping quarters. The last door that I unlocked, I should say that the doors of all the rooms were locked, and relocked by me after I had glanced inside them, contained the object of my search. Mrs. Caleb's travelling clock was on the mantelpiece, ticking away merrily. That was how I thought of it at first. And then for the first time I realised that there was something wrong. The clock had no business to be ticking. The house had been shut up for 12 days. No one had come in to air it or to light fires. I remembered how Mrs. Caleb had told my aunt that if she left the keys with a neighbour, she was never sure who might get hold of them. And yet the clock was going. I wondered if some vibration had set the mechanism in motion, and pulled out my watch to see the time. It was 5 minutes to 1. The clock on the mantelpiece said 4 minutes to the hour. Then, without quite knowing why, I shut the door to the landing, locking myself in, and again looked round the room. Nothing was out of place. The only thing that might have called for remark was that there appeared to be a slight indentation on the pillow and the bed. But the mattress was a feather mattress, and you know how difficult it is to make them perfectly smooth. You won't need to be told that I gave a hurried glance under the bed. Do you remember your supposed burglar in number 6 at St. Ursula's? And then, and much more reluctantly, opened the doors of 2 horribly capacious cupboards, both happily empty, except for a framed text with its face to the wall. By this time I really was frightened. The clock went ticking on. I had a horrible feeling that an alarm might go off at any moment, and the thought of being in that empty house was almost too much for me. However, I made an attempt to pull myself together. It might, after all, be a 14-day clock. If it were, then it would be almost run down. I could roughly find out how long the clock had been going by winding it up. I hesitated to put the matter to the test, but the uncertainty was too much for me. I took it out of its case and began to wind. I had scarcely turned the winding screw twice when it stopped. The clock clearly was not running down. The hands had been set in motion probably only an hour or 2 before. I felt cold and faint, and going to the window threw up the sash, letting in the sweet live air of the garden. I knew now that the house was queer, horribly queer. Could someone be living in the house? Was someone else in the house now? I thought that I'd been in all the rooms, but had I? I'd only just opened the bathroom door, and I'd certainly not opened any cupboards, except those in the room in which I was in. Then, as I stood by the open window, wondering what I should do next, and feeling that I just couldn't go down that corridor into the darkened hall to fumble at the latch of the front door with I don't know what behind me, I heard a noise. It was very faint at first, and seemed to be coming from the stairs. It was a curious noise. Not the noise of anyone climbing up the stairs, but you will laugh if this letter reaches you by a morning post. of something hopping up the stairs like a very big bird would hop. I heard it on the landing. It stopped. Then there was a curious scratching noise against one of the bedroom doors. The sort of noise you can make with the nail of your little finger scratching polished wood. Whatever it was coming slowly down the corridor, scratching at the doors as it went. I could stand it no longer. Nightmare pictures of locked doors opening filled my brain. I took up the clock, wrapped it in my Macintosh, and dropped it out of the window onto a flower bed. Then I managed to crawl out of the window and, getting a grip of the sill, successfully negotiated, as the journalist would say, a 12-foot drop. So much for our much-abused gym at St. Ursula's. Picking up the Macintosh, I ran round to the front door and locked it. Then I felt I could breathe. But not until I was on the far side of the gate in the garden wall did I feel safe. Then I remembered that the bedroom window was open. What was I to do? Wild horses wouldn't have dragged me into that house again unaccompanied. I made up my mind to go to the police station and tell them everything. I should be laughed at, of course, and they might easily refuse to believe my story of Mrs. Caleb's commission. I'd actually begun to walk down the lane in the direction of the town, when I chanced to look back at the house. The window that I had left open was shut. No, my dear, I didn't see any face or anything dreadful like that. And of course, it may have shut by itself. It was an ordinary sash window, and you know they're often difficult to keep open. And the rest, well, there's nothing more to tell. I didn't even see Mrs. Caleb again. She had some sort of fainting fit just before lunchtime, my aunt informed me on my return, and had to go to bed. Next morning, I travelled down to Cornwall to join Mother and the children. I thought I'd forgotten all about it, but when 3 years later Uncle Charles suggested giving me a travelling clock for a 21st birthday present, I was foolish enough to prefer the alternative that he offered, a collected edition of the works of Thomas Carlyle. The end. That's it. What a cool story, right? I've freaking loved that one. So short, so compact. Go to a scary house. How is the clock ticking? And then, oh man. Just, yeah. Such a good... When it all gets to like its most intense, I just think it's so good. The thing that I think is particularly great about this story, and it's not something that you find often, I think, is that the scariest bit, the bit where something is scratching and thumping up the stairs, W.F. Harvey describes it like a gag. Like says it's ridiculous and describes it in a ridiculous way. It says, "Not the noise of anyone coming up the stairs, but you will laugh if this letter reaches you by the morning post of something hopping up the stairs like a very big bird would hop." Like, you have to be so confident in your ability to conjure an atmosphere, to make your monster, or whatever it is, something hopping up the stairs like a very big bird would hop. But that is so freaking creepy. I've been thinking about that non-stop. That's the bit that's been living rent-free in my head, obviously. The hopping up the stairs thing. I feel like I have a slightly personal attachment to this story, weirdly. And it's appropriate, actually, for a mind fundraiser, but like... And hey, a bunch of the OCD gang have been chiming in the chat, so maybe this would be weirdly relatable. But there's OCD is a very broad church. Some obsessions and compulsions, sort of manifest in like little physical tics, like wanting everything very tidy, or like just weird little rituals that feel like you have to do them, or something really terrible will happen tapping light switches, saying little prayers, blinking, blowing kisses. And yeah, most of my like really debilitating OCD stuff is like on the mental side. Like I just have a really hard time sort of breaking out of like repetitive thought patterns. That is just awful. Like not being able to stop having a thought, sort of, or like rehearsing a sentence, or like. But yeah, anyway, it's just rough. But I do struggle particularly with locks and locking up a house and windows and window locks. And so there was something about this story about like this guy just going from room to room, having to like unlock a room, check the room, then lock the room again, and like sort of do all this stuff. Like I would be pouring sweat having to do this, even without the ghost bird going up the stairs. Anyway, so yeah. Lemony knows. Let's hear you, OCD gang. Rise up. Rise up. God. I love it. Okay, let's check in with the just giving. Okay, what have we got? Oh wow! Oh my gosh, so many. Jess Hannon, thank you. A Ghost. Archer 8492. Mental health is as grim if you pretend it's antiquated nautical transportation. Natalie, listening to this while drawing, so happy to support Mind. With autism and anxiety, I find mental health can be a struggle. It's great these charities exist. Thanks, Natalie. Nick Jeffrey says, a mimic ate my wallet or it would have been more. Oh, thanks very much, Nick Jeffrey. Very kind. Tony B, having had 2 immediate family members suffer major mental health issues in recent years, is something very personal to me. Thanks, Tony B. That's a very generous £50 donation as well. Thank you. Scott from CT, my wish came true. Thanks, Luke. Christian J. Issy says, Brank, Bronk, Bronk. Cross. Arthur Brownwater, horror stories are now battlefields. Mind how you go, lad. Thank you, Arthur Brownwater. That's a very generous donation. Arthur Brownwater. Legend. Chaos Goblin. Thank you very much. £50, that's very kind. Thanks for creating such a great online space and for writing Basically Afloat. Makes me feel so much less alone when going through it, even after all this time. Thank you. Yeah, back at you. Charlotte Seymour. Loving the spooky stories. Thanks for fundraising for such a great cause. Mum Can't Cook is favourite podcast. I think I'm on my 4th full re-listen. Wow, Charlotte Seymour. You've listened a lot more than I have. I've only listened to each Mum Can't Cook once. Grumpy Sprite, thank you. £50, that's very generous. Having recently fought through my own mental and physical health battles, if you can help. If you can't help, be kind. Good advice. Ryan and Melissa, 10 years of marriage on the 17th of this spooky month, so here is £10 for mental health. Keep being you. Thanks very much. Chris Harris, BP Phantom, Adeem Bruce, Meeple of Britain. Mind have helped me a lot over the years, as had Luke. Glad to support both at once. Awesome. Oh my gosh. I actually hadn't scrolled up to the total yet. We have raised £3,500. That is rad AF. Thank you so much, gang. You're all awesome. Oh, okay. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. And hello everyone in the chat. Sorry, I'm just enjoying everyone sort of sharing stories, mostly mental health related. Penguin Gone Mad says, raise £3,000 and mobilise the OCD folks. This is a productive night. yeah. Recently conquered, well, not conquered, recently sort of whack-a-moled an obsession about locking the car. So, well done me. Amazing what like nearly a decade of therapy and medication will do for you. I can now lock the car with ease. I find it easy. All right. Okay. You're all brilliant. Oh, thanks very much. You've been nice in the chat. Okay. I've been looking forward to this point all day, all week, all month. I finally get to read some of Andy Farrant's horror stories. I mean, I've read them all before, but finally get to read them aloud for you all. Okay, so Andy started publishing his short stories. I was lucky enough to read a bunch of them before they were published. Andy would send them to me as a sort of like, is this good? And I would be like, yes, it's really good. I always felt like I wasn't giving particularly useful feedback, because I think probably what Andy was looking for was like suggestions or recommendations or tweaks, or like, oh, this doesn't kind of work, or like you might want to bring this in earlier, or something like that. But honestly, when I read Andy's stories, I could never really think of anything I would change. It's tricky because Andy knows that I would say this. I'd probably say this even if I thought Andy's stories were terrible, just to be polite. But I'm not just saying it to be polite. That's what's so frustrating. I feel like I can never fully persuade Andy how good I think his stories are. They're brilliant. And yeah, I think they're fantastic, and you should absolutely you can read them all. If you go to uh-oh.substack.com, there's a link in the description. Yeah, they're so good. And yeah, look, we all have similar interests here. There are like horror stories about, oh man, like I like they're just so good. They're just so good. The ones I'm going to read today, Jingle, Junction, and Lowfi Beats to Kill To. I chose because I feel like they have a particular crossover with the kind of stuff that I tend to do online and on stream, for reasons that you will see, but I don't want to give away. So yeah, definitely go to uh-oh.substack.com and treat yourself to Andy's stories, because you can get them all for free. And hey, if you are a publisher or know someone, let me know. We can get Andy's stories published for him as a surprise. I think would that be legal to get Andy's stories collected and published as a Christmas surprise to him? We'd be like, congratulations, Andy, you published your stories. And you'd be like, I see, and will I get any money? And we'd be like, oh no, having set up the surprise, we get the money. Okay, right, let me do one more check-in with the Just Giving page, and then I will be reading Jingle, Junction. Okay. Oh my gosh, wow, we're coming up on 4K. I just blink and pow. Okay, yeah, we gotta check in here. We Are Lundy says, beware of bird. 'Tis the season to beware of bird. Beware of bird. Beware of crow. Midnight crow. Super Mike. Mental health is grim if you pretend it's boats. Thanks very much. Puff Puff Adder. Thanks for all you do. Also feel I have to let you know they made a film of Horse of the Invisible. Why? I will watch it though. Tusk, thank you very much. Kai C, Jess Kenny. As a new mum just coming out the other side of some pretty nasty postnatal anxiety and depression, here's some cash to help others get the help they need. Well in, Luke. Jess Kenny, £100 donation. Thank you so much. That is so kind. And I'm so pleased to hear that you're coming out the other side of the postnatal jazz. That is really tough. I know a few people who've gone through it, and I've seen it firsthand, and it is really unpleasant, and hits at a time when you really don't need anything like that. So yeah, Jess Kenny, I'm so pleased that you're coming out the other side of it. That's awesome. Congratulations. Michaela Jarnigan, thank you so much. And Ash says, thanks for supporting Mind and for all your streams and videos over the years. Cheers, Ash. My pleasure. Also, my job. So, I gotta do it. I can't do anything else. Okay. Right. Now to read Jinglewood Junction by Andy Farrant. We take a swig of both my drinks. With a final pat of the shovel, Grace stood back and admired her handiwork. 15 rows of cabbages, neatly lined up in the field, all watered and ready to grow into a bumper crop in the next few days. Her neighbour, an elephant named Cyril, wandered past. "Hooty toot!" exclaimed Cyril, twanging his suspenders. "Looks like someone is going to be enjoying some delicious cabbages." Grace replied with a happy twirl and gave Cyril 8 pairs of colourful leggings, which he accepted gratefully. The leggings had cost Grace quite a lot of money, but that was what credit cards were for. Besides, the look on Cyril's face made it all worthwhile, she assumed. It was hard to read elephant expressions. It was, all told, a perfect morning, and would have continued to be so had Grace not glanced across from the television to the clock above the lounge doorway, which told her that she should have left for work 5 minutes ago. Grumbling, Grace gestured goodbye to Cyril, saved her game, and then turned off the computer. Work had lasted, Grace estimated, 14,000 hours. She'd spilled coffee on her keyboard, she'd forgotten it was Ellis's birthday and hadn't got a cake, and to cap it all off, the company had instituted a new IT system that made everything take 4 times longer than it did before, and her managers were now all congratulating each other in a series of emails that barged their way into her inbox every 3 minutes. She'd agreed to meet her grandmother for lunch, as it had been a while since she'd seen her, but she found it hard to concentrate as her mind raced through checklists of the time-sensitive Jinglewood chores she'd have to do this evening. "Are you all right, sweet pea?" her grandmother asked. "You seem distracted." Grace told her that she was fine, she was just busy at work. "You work so hard," her grandmother beamed, leaning forward and brushing a lock of curly hair out of Grace's eyes. "But I do worry about you, sweet pea. Work's important, but you've got to make time for yourself outside of it too." Grace promised her that she'd try to take better care of herself. A steaming cup of tea sat on the low, flat coffee table as Grace turned the computer on and the familiar title theme came tumbling out of the speakers. "Jinglewood Junction," proclaimed the title screen. V1.2. This was new to Grace. There'd never been a version number on the title screen before. The game must have updated automatically while she was at work. Curious, Grace clicked on the pop-up titled "What's New?" to see what exactly had changed. "Jinglewood Junction is constantly changing and adapting to meet our users' needs," proclaimed the text on screen. Grace recognised the handwriting as belonging to Bearman Jones, the mayor of Jinglewood Junction, who was a bear. A lilting folk guitar song played softly in the background. "We've taken on board feedback from all parts of our community in putting together this new update," the message went on. You've spoken, we've listened, and the number one request we had from people was for alternative ways to earn jangles, our premium in-game currency, without having to pay real-world money. Grace nodded in agreement. It was getting ridiculous. She was nudging her overdraft as it was, and she hadn't even started shopping for holiday gifts for the other junctioneers. The note continued. Therefore, we've instituted a new system that we think is a lot fairer and should help empower everyone along the next stage of their Jinglewood journey. See you in the town square. The note ended with Bearman Jones's signature, complete with paw print, so Grace knew it was legit. Curious, she closed the text pop-up and loaded into her game. Ignoring her usual routine, she followed the winding cobbled path straight to the town square, where the game's shop, a pleasantly tumble-down, half-timbered building called the Jinglewood Emporium, was located. A cheerful tinkle of bells announced Grace's entry, and she cast her eyes around, trying to determine what had changed. Most of the store was exactly as it was before, a rustic yet exceptionally tasteful trading post selling a variety of covetable homewares which changed daily. Some of them could only be purchased using jangles, the currency that had been hammering Grace's credit card of late. Automatically, Grace did a mental inventory of the day's offering. A sleek, modern refrigerator, a potted aspidistra, a framed photograph of a duck. Grace already had all three. The shopkeeper, Jeremy Jangles, was a capybara in overalls, and he was going about his usual duties, sweeping the floor, chatting about the weather, and charging an extortionate amount for furniture. However, at the back of the shop there was a new counter, made of dark polished wood, above which hung an expensive-looking brass sign that read, Premium Store. Lounging behind the counter was an octopus wearing a baker boy cap and a sturdy canvas apron. Its tentacles curled out across the counter as it noticed Grace. "Welcome," bubbled the octopus. "Feel free to peruse our stock, but don't dawdle too long. These are limited-time offers, squiddle tea." Grace hit the button prompt, and a new menu opened up. Unusually, there was only one item for sale. A set of 4 chairs. And they were represented not with an in-game image, but as a lovingly hand-drawn sketch in coloured pencils. Grace took in the artist's rendering of the chairs. They were beautiful. Rustic and homely, yet stylish, and painted in a soft shade of eggshell that would perfectly match the decor in her virtual kitchen. She looked at the price tag and was surprised to see that instead of a price listed in jangles, as would usually be the case, there was a picture of a low, flat coffee table, similar to the one Grace had in her living room. Grace was puzzled, but the buy option was highlighted, not greyed out as it would have been if she couldn't afford it. Speculatively, she hit the button. "Sold!" shouted the premium shopkeeper. "I'll have that shipped to you overnight. Have a squiddly diddly day." The rest of Grace's evening was uneventful. She watered her cabbages, she went to a hamster's birthday party, she fielded an extremely inconveniently timed real-life phone call from her grandmother that she couldn't wrap up fast enough, she played 9 rounds of golf with the dog, and then, exhausted, went to bed, ready for the morning. Morning came, and Grace clambered out of her sagging bed, going through a mental checklist of the tasks that awaited her today. The cabbages would be ready, of course, and the dog that sold houseplants would be in town, as it was the 15th. Also, your performance review at work, a smaller voice in her head reminded her. And you haven't changed these sheets in... "Cabbages, though," said a larger voice, and Grace bounded downstairs, avoiding the broken step, to turn on the computer. Something wasn't quite right about her lounge, but it failed to register as the familiar music spilled from the television, filling the room with folksy mandolin. Grace fixed herself a coffee, sat down, and picked up the controller. In the game, Jinglewood Grace repeated the steps the real Grace had just gone through, jumping out of her reclaimed antique 4-poster bed and heading down the curving hardwood staircase before heading into her kitchen. There, perfectly arranged around her long oak table, were the 4 chairs from the store yesterday. Grace had been right. They perfectly complemented the kitchen, adding to its rustic charm while giving it an air of understated sophistication. Real Grace regarded Jinglewood Grace's new kitchen with satisfaction, took a sip of her coffee and leaned forward to put it down on her coffee table, realising just in time that it wasn't there anymore. There was a rectangular depression in the carpet, indicating where the table had been, but the table itself was nowhere to be seen. Grace stared at the space where the table should be. She ran to the front door. It was still locked and deadbolted from the night before. Nothing had been disturbed. Grace turned around and stood with her back pressed against the door, looking back along the hallway to the lounge, to the space where her coffee table should have been. As her heart rate started to return to normal, Grace began to wonder if it was such a bad thing. She'd been meaning to get rid of that old table for a while, she told herself. Nothing else had been touched, she continued. She had the chairs, didn't she? She finished. It was fine. Everything was fine. The premium item shop was empty for a few days after that. Clearly, Grace thought they were assessing the results of their experiment to see how it had gone. It was a full week until she walked into the shop to see that something new had been added to the store, but Grace could already see that whatever it was a much bigger deal than a set of chairs.
"Squiddle-dee-dee," said the octopus. "I'm so excited for today, Grace. We have a whole new extension to your house for sale."
Once again, its tentacles snaked out along the countertop, curling hypnotically in Grace's peripheral vision.
"A beautiful conservatory with attached greenhouse. It's also the only place in Jinglewood Junction where you can raise tropical fruit and flowers,"
the octopus continued, raising what would have been its eyebrows if octopuses had eyebrows. Grace's knuckles itched. She'd never wanted anything more in her life.
"But you'd better act now," said the octopus. "This offer's good for today only. Squiddle-bop-a-doo-wop."
Grace hit the button and looked at the screen. At the top was a stylized pencil drawing of the conservatory. Gorgeous, gleaming, exclusive. Underneath was the drawing of the price. A human finger. Grace stared. There was no mistaking that it was a finger. It had a nail on the end, knuckles, joints. This was a human digit. It looked, in fact, eerily similar to Grace's own finger. Grace stared at the conservatory for 10 long seconds, and then hit buy. After a fitful night's sleep, Grace awoke the next morning, immediately flung back the covers and looked down at her hands. Her stomach flipped. Her left pinky was gone. In its place was what looked like an expertly applied dressing, branded with the Jinglewood Junction logo. Grace stared for a full minute, and then, clutching her hand, she raced downstairs to the computer and turned it on, skipping through the title screen and intro sequence. "Well, that's just about wrapped up," announced the construction foreman, who was a cat. "I think this extension has come out perfectly." Grace looked in wonder at the new wing of her virtual home. It was more beautiful than she could have imagined, with intricate, decorative wrought ironwork, a gorgeous inlaid tile floor, and a hothouse that was already bursting with rare orchids, succulent pineapples, and colourful butterflies. "Just remember to keep that dressing on for at least 3 days, meow wow," said the foreman, as he and his crew departed. Grace ignored the dull ache in her hand and pressed the button to pluck a pineapple from the tree. Jinglewood Grace held the pineapple in her hand and smiled. Grace smiled back. The premium item shop stayed closed for a lot longer this time, but Grace didn't miss it. She was too busy growing tropical fruits and making stunning fruit salads that she gifted to the other residents of Jinglewood Junction. They'd thrown a pineapple festival in her honour. It was wonderful. Various friends and colleagues had noticed the missing finger, but Grace had passed it off as the result of a bike accident. Her grandmother had been the most upset, and moaned about it being yet another sign that Grace wasn't taking good enough care of herself. But Grace had told her not to worry. She had started avoiding her weekly phone calls now. There was just too much to do. It was close to 2 months later when Grace walked into the Jinglewood Emporium to buy some more potting soil, and saw that the octopus was back, its tentacles coiling behind the counter, beckoning Grace over to peruse his wares. "Welcome back, Grace," said the shopkeeper. "Squidly," he added hastily, almost as an afterthought. "We have something very special in store today. It's time for Jinglewood Junction to get a little bigger, but we can't do it without your help, Grace." Grace nodded solemnly. This sounded serious. Jinglewood Grace smiled. She always smiled. "Don't look so serious, Grace," said the octopus. "This is good news. We're going to open a cafe. A cosy place for townsfolk to hang out and spend time, listen to live jazz music and poetry recitals, and of course enjoy fresh bread, artisanal pastries and freshly brewed coffee." Grace blinked. That sounded wonderful. The octopus's expression shifted. "Of course, a project this size comes at a much steeper price, Grace. If you feel you cannot pay it, we understand. Jinglewood understands. I'm sure the town will still manage to get by somehow." The tentacles curled back towards the octopus's body as the pop-up menu flashed up the purchase details. Grace looked at the artist's rendering of the beautiful cafe, with its striped awnings, aesthetic decor, and mountains of colourful macarons. It was everything she'd ever wanted. The octopus stared at Grace as her eyes moved to the price. It was a drawing of a person, an old, kindly-looking woman. An old, kindly-looking woman who looked very similar to Grace's own grandmother. Grace stared at the button. "Morning, Grace," said the postman, who was a marmoset, as he exited the cafe. "Can't get enough of these beautiful croissants. Thanks again." Grace twirled happily in response and entered the cafe. It was full of happy customers, who sat in groups of 3 and 4 drinking coffee, eating pastries, and enjoying themselves. A red panda with a guitar was working its way through an open mic set of folk classics and earned an earnest round of applause from a nearby table of waist-coated caribou. It had quickly become Grace's favourite place to spend time in all of Jinglewood Junction. It was almost perfect. Grace walked up to place her order, and, as she always did, tried not to look at the old woman who worked there. But she was impossible to avoid as she stood behind the counter, with her fixed smile and her wide, tearful eyes that seemed to follow Grace wherever she went. "What'll it be, sweet pea?" she asked. The end! So choice. Damn, I love it. Angela Sanchez, that's so messed up. Yasmin W, okay, this is actually horrifying. Well done, Andy. LeBlanc says this is so damn good. Yeah. Man, it's so good, right? Nicola Lanti, Andy is so talented. I know. F for Granny. Silver Salamence 10. I know, it's so good. And such pure Animal Crossing vibes. Andy probably can't say that it's Animal Crossing for legal reasons, but I can. I'm not risking jail by saying, oh my god, it's so well written, it's so perfect. Except for the bit how you can like skip through the title screens. I noticed that as I was reading it that time. I was like, God, I wish I could skip through the title screens so I could more quickly trade my grandmother for a cafe. Oh yeah, it's so good. I'm so pleased that everyone enjoyed that. So good. Again, you can get there. You can read all these at uh-oh.substack.com. Yeah, you can see all of Andy's stories there. I'm going to read another one in a minute, which is similarly brilliant. But first, let me tab over to Just Giving. Whoa! And just like that, bam, we're past $4,000. Holy heckins. You absolute legends, all of you. Oh, so good. Matt H, thanks so much. Ali and Jamie, we've been loving your channel. Thank you. I'm glad to donate for such a great cause. Emmy, thanks for the donation. Adeline, Should I feel bad for listening to Mum Can't Cook way more than 4 times? No. I mean, try and open it in different tabs so that we get so that it counts as different listens would be my advice. Rise up OCD or something. Thanks, Adeline. Thank you, Anonymous. Pamela Cord, thanks for doing this and for the spookening. Sean Johnston, glad you're reading Andy's stories. I thought they were great too. When you've mentioned on streams about having OCD, it helps me dealing with mine. Yeah, cheers, Sean Johnston. Hope you're keeping well. Rex says, thanks for this, Luke. This is such an important cause, and while I cannot listen live, just want to chuck in a donation. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. LL Ford, Luke, your horror readings were the reason I started writing horror stories, and Andy was the reason I started posting my stories through Substack, so this stream is really full circle for me. Oh, that's awesome. Nate Neal, thank you so much. Todd, thank you so much. Nimbletack. A tiny horror story to say thank you, says Nimbletack. Here we go, you're getting a bonus story here from Nimbletack. It scratched at the hallowed earth with bony claws. A meaty treat lay in the casket below. Ooh, don't like that, Nimbletack. Matt, thank you so much. £50, Matt. That's really kind. Thank you. Esme says, thank you so much for the spooky stories and the support you're raising for an important charity. Here's to the next big milestone. Lisa Folletta, thank you very much. $50 Canadian. Legend. And Nerdazoid, thank you so much. Okay. Penguin Gone Mad says, I would give up my hand to get Celeste's Observatory back in Animal Crossing New Horizons. Yeah. I think that's a reasonable trade. I would also trade your hand, Penguin Gone Mad, for Celeste's Observatory in Animal Crossing New Horizons. I think it's a high price but fair. I'm a little a little disquieted by how many people in the chat are like, cool, nice that Grace got a conservatory. nice that Grace got a cafe. Nice that Grace got those chairs. I didn't think you were supposed to be on Grace's side. Okay. I want to read the next one. This is our final story of the evening. It's another Andy Farrant one. Lowfi Beats to Kill 2 is the name of the story. A brilliant title. And is, yeah, I really, really like this one. I think... Well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it afterwards because, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, here we go, folks. Andy, by the way, if you're in the chat, say hi. Andy was in the chat earlier, but may have gone quiet so as to avoid compliments. But if you're here, Andy, say hello, and then suffer the compliments. Okay. Right. Ah, there's Andy. Andy's come back to be praised. Good. Jamie looked critically at her desk. Steam rose from a cup of freshly brewed tea. Her desk lamp was set at 2, bright enough so she could see, but dark enough to give the room an aesthetic academic gloom. Next to the tea, a scented candle called Study was burning. Jamie didn't know how something could smell like study, but incredibly, that's exactly what it smelled like. She breathed it in. Everything was perfect. Settling into her chair, in an oversized hoodie, Jamie opened her laptop. The conditions were ideal. All she had to do now was write this friggin' essay. The cursor blinked in the empty Word document as Jamie surveyed the vast expanse of blank white screen that she had to fill with 3,000 words about James Joyce's Ulysses. James Joyce's Ulysses, she wrote. A good start, she thought. Not sure if those S's are in the right place, though. I should probably look that up," she continued, and was in the process of doing so when a peal of laughter from the floor below caused her concentration to shatter like a foot onto which someone had dropped a copy of James Joyce's Ulysses. It was Hannah who had the downstairs bedroom. Hannah found everything hilarious and had the most piercing laugh in human history. Jamie frowned. Once Hannah started, it took a lot for her to stop. It didn't matter, though, because that was when the sound of atonal heavy metal started punching its way in from the room next door. That was Nick, who listened to music whose melodic qualities were not improved by being filtered through 2 feet of brick. Didn't seem to harm the volume, though. Jamie sighed, opened her desk drawer, and pulled out a pair of headphones that had been a Christmas gift from her parents. The accompanying Spotify gift card had run out last month, but that's what YouTube was for, Jamie thought to herself as she gratefully tabbed away from the mostly blank essay and typed study music into the search bar. There were plenty of results, but the one that caught Jamie's eye was a live stream called Lowfi Beats to Study/Chill To. Jamie clicked the video. Immediately, Hannah and Nick vanished from her consciousness, as her ears filled with music that was simple enough not to be distracting, but relaxing at the same time. Piano, simple drums, and light guitar dominated the sound, along with a faint hint of vinyl crackle and the occasional sound of birdsong. The accompanying video playing in a window on her screen showed an animated girl in a cozy, oversized sweater wearing headphones similar to the ones Jamie was wearing. She was sitting at a desk in front of a laptop writing in a notebook. Next to her was a pot with scissors, pens, and other stationery. In the back of the frame was a window looking out onto a snowy city scene. On the windowsill there was a cat, its tail moving lazily, almost but not quite in time with the music's mellow beat. Occasionally the girl looked out of the window. Jamie noted that 34,000 people were also watching the live stream, which made her feel a bit better about her essay, like they were all in it together somehow. Along the right-hand side of the screen, the live chat scrolled by almost too quickly to read, but the messages Jamie was able to catch were nice, full of motivational pep talk and encouragement. "Who's watching from Spain?" asked one. "You got this," urged another, followed by several study-related emojis, stacks of books, a pencil writing, and a frog for some reason. Encouraged by her new classmates, Jamie tabbed back over to her essay. Her fingers settled onto the keys, and she began to write. Jamie looked at the paper her professor had just handed her in disbelief. She had scored 95 for the essay, her best graded paper during her university career by a significant margin. "Excellent work, Miss Martinez," said her professor. "Some fine writing." She smiled and turned her attention to another student. Jamie flicked through the paper in wonder. The professor wasn't wrong. This was good stuff. Some of it Jamie didn't even remember writing herself, but she'd worked pretty late that night. "Just got in the zone, I guess," she said to herself and tucked the paper into her backpack. A few weeks had passed, and another essay was due. Which is why it was so aggravating that Hannah had chosen this evening to purchase and set up a karaoke machine in her room. It was quieter now, but her and Jamie had had a blazing row about it, and Jamie had fled furious to her room, her mind racing with fantasy scenarios in which she smashed the karaoke machine over Hannah's stupid tone-deaf head. She wiped her eyes with the heels of her hands and turned on her laptop. Opening YouTube, she noticed in the sidebar that the Lowfi Beats to Study/Chill To livestream was still going. As far as she could tell, it had never stopped. She went through her usual pre-essay ritual, but this time she turned on the monitor on her desk and put the Lowfi Beats video on the second screen, so that she could look at it while she was working. It was nice. It was like having company. The girl was working hard, and Jamie would too. Once again, the music flooded Jamie's ears. It seemed slower this time, more deliberate. It was still relaxing, though, and beautiful twinkly synths and mazy bass lines twisted their way into Jamie's mind as she flexed her fingers and began to type. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, Jamie didn't know. What she did know was that it was the easiest essay she'd ever written. The words seemed to come to her, whole paragraphs springing fully formed into her mind and flowing through her fingers, through the keys, and onto the screen in front of her. The chat scrolled past in her peripheral vision. It was 40,000 strong tonight. "Anyone here studying for SATs?" asked one. "My brain hurts," wrote another. "Essay done, easy," typed Jamie happily, and closed the browser window. This time the professor stared at Jamie quizzically for a brief moment before handing back her paper. "Not your best work, Miss Martinez," she started. "Some odd interpretations of Lawrence. I'll be honest with you, I was a little disturbed." Jamie flushed hot with embarrassment. What had she written? "Is everything okay at home?" continued the professor, head tilted slightly to the side. She looked at Jamie expectantly. Jamie folded back the cover letter and looked at the first page of the essay. She didn't remember writing any of this. I've been tired lately," she managed. "I guess I let it affect my work." "If anything is bothering you, you can come and talk to me or any of the staff here on campus. We're here to help." The professor smiled. Jamie could tell she meant it. "Thanks," blurted Jamie, shoving the essay to the bottom of her bag. She couldn't get out of there quickly enough. In the campus coffee shop, Jamie sat with a fragrant cup of chai and read through the essay. Her professor was right. It was disturbing. It started out normally enough, but as the essay went on, the sentences started to run together and even occasionally switch into other languages. What started out as an examination of the themes in D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers descended into a written rant about how one character should have killed his father and graphic descriptions of how he should have done it. Jamie didn't recognise any of it. It had to be a copy-pasting error or something, she reasoned, or one of her asshole roommates pulling a prank. Now that she thought about it, that seemed like the most likely explanation. Fuming, she put the essay back in her bag. The last thing she wanted to do was confront them about it, so instead she reached a compromise with herself. She'd buy a muffin and eat it angrily. It was delicious. More weeks passed and Jamie forgot about the essay. She'd been doing well in her seminars, and her professor seemed pleased with how things were going. All she had to do to close out the term was write her end-of-year dissertation. She'd had weeks to do it, but had been putting it off, partly due to stress, but partly because Nick and Hannah had become far worse the longer term had gone on. All three were now not talking to each other. Nick and Hannah had had some kind of separate falling out, and the atmosphere in their house's communal areas had become so tense that Jamie spent most of her time at home in her room, listening to Lowfi beats to try and calm down. Tonight, though, she was using it to write her essay. Double-tapping her browser icon and muscle memorying the first 3 letters of the URL into the address bar, Jamie was quickly back on YouTube and searching the sidebar for the livestream, which, as expected, was still going, with 64,000 concurrent viewers. Its presence comforted her. She hadn't seen it offline once in the months since she had discovered the channel. Jamie clicked on the video, dragged it over to the second monitor, and settled into her chair while the ad played. The voice on screen wound up its sales pitch for invisible dental aligners, and then the familiar warm sounds of the Lowfi beats rushed into Jamie's headphones. Jamie had been working away in her document for a few minutes when she first started to notice that something was different. She couldn't place it at first, but an odd movement in her peripheral vision caused her to look at the video properly for the first time. Something was wrong. At first glance, the video was the same as it had always been, but a closer look revealed the city outside the window had turned dark. The cat was no longer in its usual perch on the windowsill. The pane it had been sitting next to was cracked, and there were streaks of what looked like blood across the glass. There was something different about the girl, too. The beats began to get slower, heavier, louder. Jamie made to try and lower the volume on her headphones, but her arms hung heavily at her sides, unwilling to cooperate. The music was crawling now, woozily shifting downwards through octaves and settling into a low drone. There were words now, too, but they were in a language that Jamie didn't understand. And then the girl turned to look at her. Jamie had never seen her from this angle before. Her eyes were solid black, and from the front it was clear that her mouth was opened wide as if she was screaming. But the noise that came from her mouth wasn't a scream, it was the music. Hazy, shifting, and now with words. No, not words. Word. A single word, repeated endlessly. A single word that Jamie suddenly understood. The girl on the screen drew the scissors from the organizer on her desk and stood up, turning the glittering blades back and forth in her hands. Mirroring her action, Jamie reached into her desk drawer and pulled a pair of scissors from the disorganized pile of stationery that lay within. She rose from her chair, walked to the door, and left the room. Moments later, the muffled sounds of a struggle could be heard from downstairs, followed by a screaming that ended as abruptly as it had started. On the screen, the girl's chair sat empty. The chat overlay sped past, faster than usual. Oh my god. What is happening? Help me, please help me. What have I done? No. No, please, no. She... Then abruptly the music stopped. The picture vanished, and 4 words appeared in their place. This live stream has ended. The end. So freaking fun. Damn. Caitlin RC, if you ended the stream on that line, Luke, I'd scream. I thought about it. I really was going to, but then I thought, no, I gotta check in. I gotta read the thing. Yeah, man, can you imagine if I'd have just, bloop. Yeah, brilliant. Andy says, that one finished in the top 10 of the Killer Shorts horror writing contest this year. I am not surprised, Andy. It is very good. I think you'll agree with me that Andy has a real knack for combining very good and astute horror with like a very sort of embedded understanding of what it's like to be a person who's just like generally online. Yeah, and like participating in popular nerd and video game culture, and just the sort of lots of the stories kind of like have that flavor to them, and they're so lightly written. There's like jokes. You've got to be confident to put jokes in your horror short story, surely, because you must risk breaking the mood. But it's nice. It makes you feel like the narrator's sort of on your side. Anyway, it's just good stuff. Yeah, it was great, and I really enjoyed reading it. Okay, well done again. If you want to read Andy's stories, you can go to uh-oh.substack.com. There's 12 stories there that are all really fun. Yeah, the Hotline to Heaven one, I think, has like proven a big hit. But I really wanted to do the Animal Crossing one and the Lowfi one because they're obviously they're subjects that are special to me, and I just love them. Okay, brilliant work, everyone. Well done, MR James. Well done, WF Harvey. Well done, Andy. But mostly, well done, all of you folks. We're at £4,300. That's amazing. There's a donation. Let me read some of the donations here. Okay. Esme, Lisa Folletta, thanks so much. Hippie02, great story from Andy, though the bit that sent shivers down my spine was the IT changes that made things slower. That hit too close to home. Oh boy, 'twas ever thus. Ali, thanks so much. Caitlin RC, turned into Trade My Grandmother for a Cafe, 11 out of 10, brilliant. Very important cause too, thanks so much. Nikki Anzalone, thanks Thank you very much, Luke, for all the cool streams and good times. Just got the text that my sister-in-law is headed into labour and delivery, so this donation is from soon-to-be-born baby Luca. Oh, congratulations. Oh, that's fantastic. What an exciting time. Thanks, Nicky Anzalone. Anonymous, thank you. Bunny Pirates, thanks for this lovely stream. Jinx UK, thank you so much. Lindsay Langdon says, thanks for all you do, Luke. Helps more than you know. Shucks, bleh, bleh. Compliments. I'm compliment proof. I dodge them and duck them. Anonymous, $20, thanks very much. And there's a donation here from Andy Farrant, who writes, some of the stories were good. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, I've had a lovely time doing this. Tadeg Cowig says, landed my first real adult job today. Thought I'd put some of it towards a good cause. That's awesome. Well done. Okay, gang. We're basically finished now. That was a lovely way to spend 2 hours in your wonderful company. If you haven't been on this YouTube channel before or for a while, then please subscribe. It's a Patreon supported channel. You can join the Patreon by going to patreon.com/normaladultluke. Mostly what I do on this channel is play difficult video games in a particularly stupid way. At the moment, I've got a Shadow of the Erdtree playthrough that's going on. New episodes of that are going up every Monday. And then for Patreon subscribers, there's a Lies of P playthrough that's happening now. If you join up today, you also get access immediately to a full Sekiro Shadows Die Twice playthrough. They're episodic. I edit them really tightly, so there's no sort of wandering about, and I try to edit in as many little jokes and stuff as I can think of, and yeah, I have a great time making them. And yeah, and also if you're on the Patreon, there's a live stream every week. It's not normally ghost stories, it's normally doing something chill like building a Lego set or playing a video game. And the next video game we're going to play is, well, I think next week we'll probably do 1 week of Astro, the new PS5 Astro platformer, and then we're gonna crack on with the new Life is Strange double exposure. We're going to do an entire playthrough of that, but I want to give it a week's buffer because I know some people are quite keen to play the game by themselves and get it finished before watching me do it. So you can either wait a week and we'll play it through for the first time and vote on the big choices together, or you can play it in your own time while we're doing Astro. Yeah, that's going to be a real good time. So yeah, do check them out. Do please subscribe if you enjoyed this, and hit up the Patreon. And yeah, I've just had a lovely time going back to the scary stories. I've really been enjoying this Halloween. It's, yeah, I'm just really feeling it this year. I don't know why, but I just am. I've been watching loads of horror movies. With the Mom Can't Cook Halloween live show is this Sunday, and I've been doing prep for that today, and it's going to be such an unbelievably fun time, I think. And yeah, I can't wait. Rose Lucas says, I'm seeing you and Andy on Sunday for MCC Live. Brilliant. Can't wait to catch you there. Awesome. Right. You're all legends. Look after yourselves. Thank you again, everyone, for all your donations. How much did we raise? I will keep this just giving page up, so if anyone's watching on demand and you want to donate, you can do. It will hopefully still work. I can't believe how much we've raised. £4,334. That is absolutely bonkers. That is going to do a lot of good. So yeah, thanks, gang. You're all great. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Andy, for writing those stories. There's a link in the description if you want to read more of his. And as I used to sign these videos off with, I think, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves and each other, and most crucially, gang, do whatever you can to remain unhaunted. Until next time, take it easy. Goodbye.